So if you think back, the first animated film game that I played was like Aladdin. I think Shiny did one version of it and Capcom did the other. And I think Capcom did the Super Nintendo version, but I got the Genesis version first. It just wowed me. I mean, it had the music from the film and it was just like this great platformer. And then you got the Capcom version and the levels were essentially the same, but they didn't have the music. You know, I looked at these two things and it's like, well, there's one of these games that I just really enjoyed and the other one was just kind of a little bit of a letdown. And I go back to that because when you look at the film games, it got to the point to where a big film came out, you expected there to be a game. You know, this is probably into like maybe 2004, 2005. When Cars came out, THQ sold something like 13 million copies of Cars on video games. It was a huge, huge thing. And at that point in time, people really wanted these games. But as more animated films started coming out, it used to be like there might be one or two a year, and it started to go to 2 to 3 or 4 to 5. Number one, I think there was a market saturation with it. But then number two, quality started going down. The reason behind it, I mean, now this is the business guy in me talking. If you're a publisher that goes out and licenses, you're paying for that film license. And so let's say you pay $5 million for that, of, hey, we're gonna give you this. And so before you even get into like development budget or anything else, you've got this big kind of license fee that you've paid hanging over your head. When you do that, you might go back as a business guy and decide that you're gonna skimp a little bit on the development side. Now, that's just like the money side. Then you get into the timing stuff. And so like on the timing side, these films change quite a bit. Films usually go into development, maybe like about 4 years, and then like after a couple years, they'll come out of development, and then they have 2 years of, they're in production. And so when you do that, I mean, they'll go through and change things up. And as the game guys, it's like you're kind of being whipped around at the end of that. And so particularly if you're trying to do a movie game that retells the story of the film, it can get really hard, and as things change, you have to change and you're reacting, so you're not proactive with your plans. Both those things start to just scrunch the quality. When the quality starts to go down, less people start buying them, so the budgets go down, and so it's just this downward spiral to where it was a no-win situation. So that's how the industry got to the point to where I would say in about 2007, maybe 2008, licensed games were starting to just get like a horrible reputation. So for us, really, okay, it's Disney. It's like, now I'm the kids and family game guy. Like, we do movie games, at Disney. What are we supposed to do to try to make, this work and really get the quality back up? I want there to be quality family entertainment. Like, I want there to be really good stuff for me and my kids to play together. And this was really kind of like, man, we work at Disney. We need to be able to figure this out.
It must have been scary times like before Disney Infinity came about and just seeing the licensed movie games start to dry up. Were you worried about the company at that point?
So absolutely. We'd kind of been a survivor company, over the course of the years. In the 90s, when we were doing that stuff, we built our own engine right in about 2000, 2001, right as the coin-op industry started subsiding, and so all of those awesome ports that we're doing for Midway weren't really there from a business anymore. And then we started doing our own games with our engine, and I always felt like we were always kind of like one step ahead, and like the step underneath us crumbled, and anybody who was just a porting developer went away at that point in time. We were always fearful. I mean, that number one, I guess that's just like the part of the industry was, man, are we going to get another contract? I mean, who's kind of out there and what kind of game is it going to be? But when being internal at Disney, there's a little bit of a sense of security that you end up getting. But then there's also, hey, we're a big company, and if that business isn't working, yeah, there's a fear. Well, at that point in time, not only was there a problem with licensed movie games, there's a big problem with console in general, and you've got all the social guys kind of coming into the industry saying, console's dead, everything's about mobile, the world is changing, console's dinosaurs, people don't want to play it anymore. And our new president that came in was the head of Playdom, and so he was one of those guys that was coming in from social gaming, and he definitely believed that. And so when you started looking at that environment, we were really concerned that he wouldn't see the value in kind of big screen, hey, everybody shares the experience kind of console type development. Fortunately, we convinced him otherwise. Like Toy Story 3, that was really a game for us that mattered a lot to people because we were kind of showing them what we wanted to do with the toy box in the toy box mode of Toy Story 3. So people could kind of get their head around this a little bit more open world, kind of play and customize and build, but with a little bit of structure. He came in, bought the idea. We pitched it up to, Bob Iger as like, hey, this is really what we'd like to do. And Bob bought in as well. So that was It was scary, but it was also exhilarating because part of the fun part of my job, you get to go in and like you're pitching John Lasseter on, like, hey, this is what we'd like to do, and can we do this? And you're dealing with these guys that are kind of like living legends in a way, and so it's very unique and special, to be able to do that kind of stuff, and so it's great. So it's both.
Toy Story 3's development, was that a bit of a Hail Mary for console development for you guys?
So when Disney bought Pixar had already licensed out the rights to their films, their future films, to THQ in a separate deal. So when Disney stepped in, Disney Interactive did not have the rights to do the games for Up and WALL-E, and there were a few others to come. And I think there were 3 more movies on the deal. But we did have rights to do sequels. So Disney already owned Toy Story. So when Toy Story 3 was coming up, Pixar already had a pretty entrenched relationship with THQ as the developer of choice for them. Disney just acquires Pixar, comes in and says, look, we've got our own video game division. We want to do the Toy Story. Pixar was like, well, look, we don't know that we're comfortable with that. Why don't you guys come up and pitch us ideas? So we were pitted against THQ in kind of this kind of pitch off to go in and say, this is what we would do with Toy Story 3. We pitched the toy box idea. Basically kind of went in and said, look, we don't want to do a see the movie, play the game kind of thing necessarily. We want to play with Andy's toys, and we want to let the world play with Andy's toys like they want to play with them. And that really resonated with John Lasseter. Yeah, he is a toy dude, but he's also like, yeah, everybody wants to play these toys like Andy does. And and it's part of his personality in there. And I think a lot of those creative sequences that you see with Andy playing with those toys definitely kind of resonate with John. I would say, honestly, the biggest wave of relief was landing Toy Story 3. That one was like, oh, great, we're going to get a bigger budget, and we're going to have a longer time frame, and we get to make quality the target, because everybody knew it was going to be a big film. And so we knew that we could make a statement with that one. And then that allowed us to spend some more money on Cars 2 when we did that game as well. And so, we felt like we kind of pulled off a pretty good, kind of kart type racer, with that one. Our whole goal was, with every film game we wanted to do at that point in time, set the quality bar expectation that, what, if you do it one time, maybe that's a mistake. That game was fun, just whatever happened. But when you start making it a trend, when it's like every game that comes out for those Pixar films or for those Disney films, then I can start trusting as a consumer. And we thought we could bring the consumer back to licensed games, because people love these. They love the franchises. We just needed to make good games. That was really kind of the belief. When it kind of came then to Infinity, really what the new president was pitching, it's John Pleasance. John came in and said, like, look, we need big ideas. Mobile is a big idea, and the social games are going huge. We need a big idea in console as well, and that's where it was like, okay, well, let's bring everything together. And so a lot of what Infinity was a plan to, how do we make the game higher quality so that people want to buy it? And that's the idea of the toy box, was let's create an area to where all the games as play sets can be movie games if you'd like. But they all have like a common set of moves and those kind of things that we can make better year to year. And we can spend more money on the aggregate than we could on any one game to make sure that that thing is fun. We probably had to clear about 3 or 4 major hurdles internally in the company. Tripping up on any single one of those could have wiped the whole thing out for us, but we cleared them all, and it's ended up being really good. And so, from a relief standpoint, it was like, got over that hurdle. Okay, here's the next one. Yeah, they're going to let us combine everything together. Okay, yes. And so we kind of had to build the case. It wasn't just like a one make it or break it kind of thing.
And then is the realization of, we have to do this every year now.
So yes and no. I look at it this year as, okay, so Infinity 1 is really, hey, it's Disney and Pixar. Infinity 2, we knew we wanted to, kind of bring Marvel into that whole equation. And then while we were going through that, then Star Wars gets acquired. We're like, oh man, Infinity 3, that's really going to be kind of the last major product family that gets brought into this. So we do know that, kind of moving forward, we've kind of got this idea that Infinity starts to kind of hit its steady state. Like Infinity 1, 2, and 3 is really the launch of all these great families of properties. As we move forward, it might take on a little bit of a different form, as far as will it be a yearly release or not. Really what ends up happening is we get all these great films that are kind of coming down, and to tie back into what we were trying to do in the first place was make sure that we can do great content for those. So we're thinking about experimenting with some different ways as to, okay, how are we going to do that in the future, and how do we bring that to consumers at the right time? Because really the right time is when that film comes out.
Disney Infinity 2.0 is very much seen as this is the Marvel edition. Even the naming was super confusing. And you don't want 3 to be seen as the Star Wars. You just want it to be seen as the start of kind of the grab bag platform.
So that's really, it's a pretty good way to put it. When I look at it, it's like when we were bringing Marvel in, it's a hard problem because you've got, huge Marvel fans and you've got Disney fans. And so we were already, a pretty strong statement with Disney Pixar. But then just when you break it down and we go sit down with a meeting with the Marvel guys of how do we bring these two things together in a graceful enough way that you don't alienate any of your the people who love your brand. And it was hard. And so what we ended up doing was kind of coming out with a very strong Marvel message, to try to make sure that we really were speaking to those fans. We wanted a lot of stuff that kind of came with Disney, but that's why we did the split release. In hindsight, we confused people by doing it that way. And so, we've just said, we're not going to do it that same way again this time. We've now done one. This time out, we're going to come out with, a pretty strong Star Wars statement, but we are Infinity. We are all things Disney. As excited as I am to be working on Star Wars right now, Inside Out is going to be, a very cool and different thing that people really, it doesn't really fit the mold of what we've done so far. And I think what we're doing with Marvel this year is also the same thing in a different way. So there's some great stuff coming down the pipe on this. On Infinity 2, after the initial kind of success of Infinity 1, we then had more money to kind of go back and say, okay, well, where do we want to try to invest? And it didn't impact Infinity 2 as much as we would have liked it to, just from a time frame perspective. But that's really where we said, okay, we can bring more people in and really try to make a strong quality statement on Infinity 3. We ended up bringing on a host of studios. So we ended up working with Heavy Iron and Panic Button and Blind Squirrel here to do a lot of our other platforms for us, whether that be iOS or PS4 or those kind of things. But then Gobo's, making a playset content. Then we also brought on Ninja Theory, which was, kind of the biggest one. They're the biggest team to kind of join us. I'm talking about the number of people on the project kind of coming from them. And then we've also got Sumo Digital that we're working with as well. So we've got 3 developers, kind of in England. So we end up, traveling to England, fairly frequently on this. And then we've got United Front Games that's joined up to do a Marvel playset for us. So team size, I would say, developers worldwide, we've also grown here at Avalanche. We're probably about 250 developers now. So I'd say we're probably close to about 450 developers, and then QA and, some logistics stuff. So it's probably about a 500-man team altogether.
Isn't that terrifying? Isn't it just going to keep ratcheting up?
So the thing is we're pretty tied to the Disney film slate, kind of moving into the future, and so we kind of have a pretty good idea of what that's going to look like, and so we're carefully selecting partners right now to make sure that we're trying to give them enough time on play sets and the content that they're developing. I don't see it growing as rapidly. I think we kind of needed to get to a certain scale, and then I think we can kind of keep it there.
And what about the content within the game then? Seems like you just keep adding more and more, which is great, but it has to be tough to convey to consumers this is what Disney Infinity is.
So this is now kind of, you're getting into the philosophy of what are we trying to do with this? Sure. So we wanted it to be very broad. We wanted a lot of mechanics. We wanted there to be something for everyone. If we can make a game that you want to play with your kids, we've won. If we've got that set up, and then we are going ahead and we're bringing kind of in these new franchises, we feel like we don't necessarily have to add a huge big thing other than if a franchise needs it. Mm-hmm. Now, the toy box being kind of that broad thing where everything comes together, we still don't quite feel like we've spoken to every type of player yet in there. And so we're going to continue to add a few more gameplay mechanic types into that. But then every year, we really want to go through and do a better job and deepen some of those things.
It's a bold claim and task to be like, we're going to have something for absolutely every type of player.
It's hard. The thing, but which player do you want to leave out? You've got the kind of the broad stereotypes. We've got boy players who love combat and girl players who love, nurturing or customization. But really, you've got players across the entire spectrum. We've got moms who, we've got mail from moms that are like, this is the first game I actually play on a console with my kids. And so when you hear that kind of stuff, it's like, okay, we're doing something right. It's resonating correctly in kind of these certain circumstances. I think the hardest thing is, if you're trying to be all things to everybody, you're going to fail at some, at some component of that. So really what we're trying to do is make sure that it is, we started off with kind of like the target of, kind of dads and their kids. I mean, that's like gamer dads and their kids is kind of what we're trying to hit, and then we're trying to broaden that out.
How long do you see this lasting? What's your vision for the future?
We went in and pitched this as a 5 to 10 year platform. So easily 5. Anything past that starts to become like almost like hubris to think that the technology and or platforms for games or those kind of things don't change dramatically, and just upset our ability to do that. So, but I mean, for the foreseeable future, I mean, we're definitely, we're behind this as something that we feel like speaks to the consumers that kind of like these kind of things.
Do you see yourself in the studio as the licensed game experts? Do you think in the future you'd ever be interested in creating original IP again?
So we've talked about that. I mean, so there's this whole creative thing kind of going on. Like, oh man, we want to go create something of our own. The reality is it is so hard right now. I mean, the level of when you go to create something brand new, the expectations for that are just through the roof right now. And I mean, you look at like some of if you're thinking about more of like, this happens more often in the core, kind of space, with Destiny or Titanfall or, any of the kind of the big franchises that have kind of been launched in the last couple of years. It's really difficult, and it would take pretty much the whole studio. I mean, we've got some ideas kind of simmering here, and we love the concept of trying to do that eventually, but I think for right now, I wouldn't necessarily expect that, within the next few years. There's some very fulfilling technical problems as well as some of the creative ones of like, then you look at that as a game designer and go, what can I do with that as a game? It may not make sense for the play set, but man, we know that we have a lot of freedom in the toy box to kind of come in and play those things. So yeah, we do end up getting some freedom to kind of scratch those. I mean, like, we love kart games, right? And so, you can kind of see those things as it's like, which of the gameplay genres do you want to go play with and, see what we can do? You kind of get to do that here. I think people are in for a surprise on some of the stuff. There's some really cool stuff coming on Star Wars here.